Hi there, welcome. I'm back out on a location I came to just a few nights ago to do a night shoot, and I thought I'd come back during the daytime just to show you a little bit of what went on and how I set about things, because it's a lot easier to do that and to see it in the daylight. It all looks a bit different now, especially as we go through these woods up here. It was a little more, I don't know, nerve-wracking, scary in the dark, particularly with the animal eyes staring back at you from your torch lamp. Always something there to wind you up. Anyway, let's crack on, and when we get to the site I'll explain how I set things up. So in this kind of location, it's always worth keeping in mind just looking out for possible shots, particularly this time of year. The bracken's turning to this nice rusty colours, and the leaves in the trees are just beginning to yellow up as well. Anyway, in the next fortnight or so, hopefully we're going to have some nice woodland or autumn opportunities. So we're not quite there yet, but it is time to be looking out for those sort of golden russet colours. It's also some of those views through the trees, because again, this time of year it's that kind of weather where we're going to get early morning mist, and as we get closer to dew point and the temperature drops at night in the early hours, just as it's starting to get light or soon after sunrise, we'll have some beautiful scenes through the trees, maybe sunbeams coming through the branches, striking the mist, and opportunities for some of those lone tree shots in the early misty mornings, with the foreground trees separated by those in the background by that early morning mist. Something to be watching out for. This is such a beautiful little place, it really is. I have to come back here. It's finding the shot. There's a little copse of trees up ahead. Must swing round, kind of behind me up along the path there. And I have a feeling there's a shot to be had there. And so I must spend a little bit of time just scoping that one out. So this is the tree I was talking about just now. The problem is there's no separation from the background. So in the daylight there's no room really to mess around with different depth of field and aperture settings. But with light painting at night there definitely are options, particularly for light painting, for lighting the individual branches of the tree. So I think it's worth coming back to just to light paint this tree, because it could look really brilliant at night. It could make a great light painting subject in its own right, irrespective of what's actually going on in the sky above. Anyway, enough of that. We're just going to skip back now to the footage from the other night, and I'll catch up again with you on the other side of that. Well, this may be one of those times when you think, why am I doing this? But hopefully things will be okay as the evening progresses. At the moment it's supposed to be 0% low cloud, 0% high cloud, 2% medium level cloud, but at the moment it looks a lot more than that. It's almost complete cloud cover, and well, hopefully it's gonna clear. Let's see what the night brings, shall we? We'll see you in a few minutes. So this is the New Forest, one of the enclosures, and as I said earlier, I have been here before. I've got to say, this is my first attempt to do a walk and talk in the dark. I hope the quality's okay. It's just with my iPhone, but it's the easiest thing to use, if I'm honest, doing this. So I've got about another quarter of a mile, I think, or so, maybe a bit more than that, to where I intend to do the shoot. Hopefully we will be free of incidents. Right, well, here we are. I'm pretty much set up in terms of just getting the camera gear up on the tripod. Slight complication is that there's cloud and quite a lot of it. So I did a little quick test shot in the direction of the Milky Way. I don't know whether you're going to be able to see this, but that's quite a lot of cloud. It's supposed to be 2% at the moment. 2% cloud cover. That looks like a lot more than 2%. But the good news is I can see an end to it in the distance, and so hopefully it's going to do what it's supposed to do. It's going to pass overhead and it's going to leave nice clear sky behind. It just might take a while. So I could be here a little while. Unfortunately, the cloud is too bright in terms of uplighting from city lights for me to really be able to get on and shoot my foreground, because I need the night sky from my foreground shots to be dark and really only the foreground showing up. And I think I'm going to struggle to do that at the moment. I'll have a go, but it may well be that I'm going to have to wait another hour or so, maybe even, before I can get to shoot anything. Anyway, catch you up again in a minute. Okay, time for a quick update. It's about 20 past 12, and there's still actually quite a bit of cloud around, unfortunately. I don't think I'm going to be able to see it over my shoulder, but it's still there. But it is very gradually moving away. So I'm hopeful. What I've done so far, I've taken a whole bunch of foreground shots of this tree that's over my right shoulder here, out of view. And so that's been a mix of shots at, I believe, ISO 500 and 15 seconds and f5 aperture. So I've taken loads and loads of shots with different lighting, different angles, just to give myself plenty to choose from in post-processing. Then I've also, and I had to wait really until the most of the cloud had gone, and certainly none behind the tree itself, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to isolate the background in post-processing. So I really need a dark sky behind the tree. So hopefully those settings should have achieved that, and those were done with focus set on the tree, not on the stars. So that's the foreground shot, and the second stage is to shoot the sky. So what I've done with that, changed all the settings up. So again, a 15-second exposure. I think I used about 2400 ISO and an f2.2 aperture. I think this on my Nikon at 20mm f1.8 lens. So I've taken 10 shots, static shots of the sky. I haven't got the tracker out at this stage. There's really been no point with the sky the way it is with all of this cloud about. So I've got a bit of time to kill. I think I'm going to try a different composition on this tree. The Milky Way is very vertical in the sky at the moment, which is a bit of a shame. I'd like it to have been on an angle to frame the tree, but that's not going to happen. So it's vertical, and so what I'm going to do, I'm going to try a portrait shot of this tree, reposition things, get down lower, angle higher up, and see if we can get a nice portrait shot of the Milky Way to the right of the tree and the tree to the left of the frame. So that's what I'm going to set up for now. Pretty much repeat of the previous performance, just with the camera in portrait mode rather than landscape mode, and I got much closer to the tree, lower down, and the camera up at a more acute angle, and that has a much better composition actually. The tree fills the frame far more than in the previous composition. It also meant it was easier to light because there was less of the surrounding foreground that needed to be lit. The other thing I did differently here, I'm not quite sure how it's going to work out, but I did a bit of a vertical panorama with the Milky Way, so I may get an elongated vertical shot of the panorama. I left as much of the foreground or the landscape non-sky part of the image out of the shot as I could, so that hopefully I'll get as much of the Milky Way in as possible. All the time there was unfortunately low cloud on the horizon, and there's more cloud building up now, so I think I'm pretty much done for the night. So this is roughly the composition that I started on, and I've tried to position this tree in the foreground here so that it had separation from the tree behind, and the plan was to have the Milky Way to the right. I've got to say I'm not really sure, to be honest, that it works as a composition, even if I could get a clear enough shot of the Milky Way. And the reason for that is just the Milky Way is literally just straight up in the sky, and it just looks a bit unbalanced as a photograph. You know, if we'd got it framing maybe these three trees all the way across the horizon at the right time of year, and we had a strong enough view of the Milky Way at the right time of night, yeah, maybe, but it just didn't really work actually as a composition. So I'm not sure it's the right one for a Milky Way shot, but it makes a nice subject in its own right, and that was going to be the story of the night really. The other thing that struck me in the dark was that trying to nail down your composition in daylight as far as you can, particularly with the benefit of an app like PhotoPills, is quite an important thing to do, to come out to somewhere like this, which is a little bit difficult to navigate in the dark, to know exactly where it is that you're going, to know how you're going to set up, where you're going to set up, and what kind of shot you have in mind. That's quite important. It doesn't mean that you can't be spontaneous about things. I was the other night, but you need to have some kind of basic plan beforehand about your composition so that you know what kind of issues maybe you're going to have to overcome on the night. So I reckon this is pretty much where I was for my second composition. Got right underneath the tree really. It's almost overhanging me at the top, and what this did was it just enabled me to really get a very unusual angle on this tree, to get up close and personal with it, so to speak. Now I framed it, I'm not sure if I've quite managed it in this video shot. I hate recording in portrait mode, but there you go. The intention here was to make sure that all of the foliage of the tree was just within the frame. So I just had these two compositions the other night, which is quite unusual to my normal photography. As a landscape photographer, I tend to be constantly on the lookout for opportunities in the landscape to take a picture of, and whereas for this I really came out with one shot in mind, and but allowed myself that second composition. right up close and personal, so to speak, to this tree right underneath it, and a real bit of drama. It took quite a bit of lighting. There's a temptation with light painting to light it from every possible angle, and when you look at each shot, and I must have taken, I don't know, 24 shots of this tree, you look at each individual shot and you think, I just love the way the light strikes that, and look at those dramatic shadows and highlights. But if you put all of that into the same shot, it's just not going to look even remotely natural, because you've got equal directional light coming from each direction. And so much like you would when you're lighting a human subject in a studio for a portrait, you need to be mindful of the strength of light from each side and what kind of story you're trying to tell in a picture. And that's more of a subjective, artistic thing. Anyway, I'd be interested to know from you guys which of these images you prefer, whether you prefer the original shot that I came out to shoot, or whether or not you prefer the portrait shot with the tree really filling the frame. So if you've been watching my channel, then you may have gathered I'm getting a bit frustrated with the lack of opportunity to photograph the Milky Way in this part of the world. And I've been out particularly to the New Forest now quite a number of times to try and shoot the Milky Way, and unlike other locations, I have just not been successful here. I think part of that may be that to the south, which is pretty much that direction, we've got a lot of city lights. They're not terribly near, but they're near enough that if there's even the slightest amount of wispy haze in the sky, they're going to accentuate it, and it's going to wash out the stars and the Milky Way particularly, and especially any kind of nebulosity that you might hope to be in there. And I've done a bit of a search on Google for New Forest night shots and Milky Way shots, and I've got to say there are precious few, and there really aren't any that I've seen that I thought that's got a real wow factor, that's a really clean shot of the Milky Way. And if there are any, I suspect they may well be a sky replacement from a Milky Way shot elsewhere. But if you know different, and if you have managed to shoot good Milky Way shots in the New Forest, I'd love to know, because I've just got to wonder whether it's something I'm doing wrong or whether it's just not a great location for it. It's about a Bortle class 4 or so in the New Forest, so you know, it's never going to be great, but I do feel I ought to be able to do better than I have done. Now, I have considered buying a light pollution filter for the camera, specifically to photograph in a New Forest, and I may well do that. I mean, they tend to work better with the yellow kind of sulfur street lighting, and they're becoming less effective though, as I understand it, and part of the reason for that, and particularly down this way, is that a lot of the street lighting is being replaced with white lighting, and you don't want to be filtering out white light, because that's what your stars are, and that's what you really want to be showing up. So if you've got a solution to that, if you've had any successful night sky photography in this part of the world, in the New Forest, I'd love to know about it. Okay, so having said all of that, doesn't mean that I have given up on the New Forest. When it comes to the night sky photography here, I think the thing to do really is to just lean into what you can do, to what you've got. Like that tree that I showed you earlier, that I think's got real character and real shape into it, and could be a really dramatic subject in its own right, irrespective of what's going on in the sky above. Okay, just the other point I wanted to mention was that when I shot this tree behind me with the portrait shot, that was a good example, I think, of making use of what you do have and not trying to achieve something that you can't achieve. Because when I came to do the post-processing, the clouds that were a real annoyance on the night actually became a feature, a great feature of the photograph. There is this kind of winged shape to the clouds that are behind the tree that kind of reflects the shape of the underside of the limbs of the tree itself. And it actually, of all the shots that I took, the clouds were constantly moving through the scene. It was that one that I chose in terms of preserving the background and the clouds in the shot, because actually they became a real feature of it. There was something quite dramatic about the shape of them. Okay, I've prattled on enough, probably. I really enjoyed my night out the other night. One thing I did want to point out was I'm not going to do any videos just yet on how I process my night sky images. If I'm honest, I don't really feel accomplished enough at it at this time to start advising other people. But if you do want to know more about that, then I would suggest heading over to Richard Tatty's channel. That's T-A-T-T-I. Richard is in Australia, I think West Coast, I might have that wrong, but a very, very accomplished night sky photographer. And his channel on YouTube is called Nightscape Images. And Richard has a whole load, a bucket load of videos and playlists on how to process night sky images and how to make sure you take the right shots in the field to enable that processing to work out correctly. So if you're interested in that, go across and have a look on his channel. I would thoroughly recommend that. Thank you for watching. Do like, subscribe, do comment. Comments particularly I find really encouraging, particularly if they are constructive, and I love to engage with you guys.